Welcome. I'm James Seymour, the CEO of C4Net, and thanks for joining us for this webinar on the findings and recommendations from the C4Net supported study into a roadmap to successful demand response program. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the many lands on which we meet today and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples present with us here today. As we move through the energy transition, demand-side management is increasingly important. As technology develops, it becomes increasingly feasible, and as complexity rises, it becomes an economic imperative. However, implementation is challenging at a practical level. The energy market structure of today is yet to fully evolve, and therefore practical challenges exist. This project was born out of the exploration of those challenges, particularly at that retailer and network provider interface. I'd like to thank our partners for this project, AGL and AusNet Services, and the researchers from RMIT and Monash University. C4Net is strongly supported by its core participants of AusNet Services, City Power, Powercore, United Energy, University of Melbourne, Deakin, Federation, Swinburne, RMIT and Monash Universities, together with the Victorian Government, and continues to invest in research aimed at helping the sector move through the transition as efficiently as possible. Please visit our website, c4net.com.au, for details of the project findings and activities relating to this project, and also the whole portfolio of projects that C4Net is pursuing. As we move through this presentation, please utilise the Q&A function through Zoom. We particularly like the engagement, and this is your chance to engage with the proponents of the project. With that, I'd now like to hand over to the research team to share the project findings and recommendations with Reza Razzaghi to lead us off. Over to you, Reza.
Thanks, James, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining this webinar. I'm Reza from Monash University, and today we will walk you through the findings of mainly Work Package 3, which is the impact of tariffs on the uptake of batteries. And for this webinar, we have a number of presenters, myself and Imran from Monash Uni. Then we have Lasantha from RMIT and Kedem and Clare from AGL. And what we will be talking today is essentially this topic. So first, Kedem and Clare will talk about AGL and overview of the battery case studies. Then Lasantha will take you through the findings of the project overview on findings of Work Package 1 and 2. So as mentioned, this project had 3 work packages, and we had a webinar a few weeks ago for Work Package 1 and 2, but we will provide you an overview of what has been done in these 2 work packages. The main part will be Work Package 3, and Imran will walk you through the findings. And finally, I'll talk about the recommendations that came out of this work. So I hand over to Kedem and Clare.
Thank you, Reza, and thanks to you, James, and C4Net for making this project happen. We're quite excited to be with this because we believe that the collaboration between universities and industry is a very important mechanism to move forward and try and find solutions for things that are not that easy. With that, there's a few words about AGL and why AGL is interested. I'll start with the broader background, and Claire will take it into the more details. Look, AGL, assume everyone knows, but the key thing is it's a company with 185 years of experience, 4.3 million customers, and the largest electricity generator. And that puts a key point about responsibility. You can say with great power comes great responsibility. And when you're talking about climate change, this is where for AGL, decarbonization is a key part of its strategy. Last year in September, AGL came up with a new strategy and has 2 key facets. One is on the demand side, is connecting customers to a sustainable future. That is that 4.3 million customers, helping them find the way forward to low carbon future. And in parallel, a transition in our energy portfolio on the supply side. So one of the key parts of our strategy is to get 12 gigawatts of generation and firming capacity by the end of 2035. And the combination of these 2 things is what we consider to say to our aim is to lead the energy transition.
Next slide.
Yep. Next slide, please. And yeah, I guess we moved on. So this is well sent. So yeah, let's move to the next slide. Yeah. So one of our key ways of doing it is we would talk, by the way, we're talking about in this case more than behind the meter, and this is part of what is called the virtual power plant. And as we see it now, it's now become commonplace where when you're looking at behind the meter assets, whether it's households, EV chargers, backup generators, business customers, all of those elements where there's flexibility in it, whether it's residential batteries or business customers that can change their load. We consider all of that as part of the age of virtual power plant. With the main aim is building access, building capability, aggregating capacity to provide grid services, grid support services. And this is kind of now kind of the key point of our talk. One thing that we've done quite a bit is, if you can move to the next slide, is demand response. That was a key focus of the first two work packages. And that is kind of already a very established approach. We understand the benefits of it. And AGL is a key player in that market. We have more than, in the virtual power plant, we have more than 316 megawatts of capability that's already deployed in the market. Demand response is a big part of it, but what is upcoming and important and part of this work package are the behind the meter batteries. And this will all pass on to Clare Meeker.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, as Kedem said, I work in commercial batteries at AGL. So batteries for the commercial segment, so we're talking about businesses, universities, organisations, are a bit different to the way that batteries in households and grid scale or utility batteries are used. A major part of the value of a battery is in reducing your electricity bill costs through reducing demand charges. So batteries can help businesses decarbonise by storing solar that's generated on site and used later. But when you're doing a business case and feasibility, it's important to understand how the batteries can reduce the demand charges through reducing load. So to understand this, there are many DNSPs across, distribution network service providers, which have different network tariffs and demand charge structures within their tariffs. So we need to understand the impact of different network tariffs and how batteries behave, and then the business case, which impacts ROI for batteries. So that's why this research is important, to understand that interaction. Batteries can also provide services to networks like AusNet and PowerCore and others by using excess solar in the day and charging batteries from the grid. And there are some networks that are innovating with some trial tariffs specifically for batteries that are connected to the grid by having rebates where batteries get paid to charge from the grid when there's high solar in the network, or the other way around. So we need to understand how these innovative tariffs and the regular business tariffs interact with the way that batteries work to charge and discharge, and that's why this research was important. Next slide, please, Reza. So just quickly, AGL's got experience in batteries, so AGL has the highest market share in installing solar for businesses across Australia, and we're leveraging that to go and work in the commercial battery space as this sort of product takes root in the Australian market. So AGL's installed batteries for a water treatment plant, a supermarket, a hospital, Essential Energy in New South Wales, and a logistics company, and more. We also do a lot of grid scale batteries, but don't want to dwell on this slide. Next slide, please, Reza. Thanks. So to complement, the solar and wind farms and energy transition, AGL has 130 megawatts or 2 batteries operational now in South Australia and New South Wales, and we're building a few more, but we've got more than 2 gigawatts in total in the pipeline. AGL is investing heavily in the energy transition, and these grid scale batteries are important to support solar and wind farms and to help the whole system decarbonise. And commercial batteries are part of that, transition as well. They play an important part. Next slide, please. So just some quick case studies. So in February this year, a battery was switched on in the Essential Energy Network in Port Macquarie, New South Wales. And the way this battery helps the network is to store excess solar that's generated from businesses and households' rooftop solar systems during the day and then released later at night. And this helps to improve the reliability of the poles and wires network. So AGL did a full EPC installation and helped co-design the battery control system to do network services, but also to participate in AGL's virtual power plant, providing grid stability support services as well as the network services. Next one, please. And finally, this case study is just showing how we work with the commercial sector. So there's a concrete company in Canberra which has installed a Tesla Megapack, which provides services to that local distribution network called Evo Energy. And at the same time, this battery participates in AGL's virtual power plant. So we build a software integration with the battery control system and software. And then there's a smart control algorithm which co-optimizes to maximise revenue in wholesale energy markets and FCAS markets, as well as providing those network services to Evo Energy, the DNSP there. That's all. Yeah, just wanted to reiterate that this provides a background to this project. So I'll hand back to Reza. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Claire. So we launched this project almost 2 years ago with the funding from C4Net and AGL, as well as the AusNet Services as our industry partners, with of course with our Monash University colleagues. So this project in fact consisted of 3 work packages. The first work package, we have a look at how we can improve the baseline calculations that we use in the demand response programs using machine learning. And the second work package, we have investigated how to relieve the bottlenecks of using the backup generators in the demand response program. So outcomes of these 2 work packages we have mentioned and we have disseminated through webinars in the May. And this particular webinar will focus on the work package 3 to identify the effects of tariffs for the uptake of batteries. Yes, next slide, please. So these are the main recommendations we made in the first 2 work packages. So in the first work package, we have identified how we can improve the baseline calculations using the machine learning techniques. So we have identified different machine learning techniques under different contexts to improve the baseline calculations. And also we have proposed a dynamic export limits for the backup generators, because we saw that the static export limits imposed on these backup generators hindering the C&I customers to make the better out from their backup generators. And the third recommendation was in fact proposing flexible operating modes. That means whether that the generator should operate in the voltage control mode or just the active power dispatch mode. And the fourth recommendation came into the DNSP guideline related thing. This is about the intertripping and synchronization standards. So we saw that there is a little bit discrepancy between each DNSPs on these standards. So we think it is better off to harmonize them so that we can encourage more C&I customers to sign up for the demand response programs. And finally, the last recommendations coming out from the work package 2 was promoting the backup biodiesel for the backup generators, because biodiesel have less emissions, and we saw enough supply chain exist in Australia to utilize the biodiesel for backup generators. And also the backup generators which can work with the biodiesel efficient to also exist. So next slide, please. Okay, so today's webinar will be solely going to focus on the work package 3, which is all about the identify the tariffs that can intensify the uptake of batteries. Over to you, Imran.
You're on mute, Imran.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thanks, Reza. Sorry for that mute. So I will talk about work package 3 findings, which aims to identify tariffs that can incentivize the uptake of batteries. Next slide, please. scopes. Firstly, the review of existing network tariff structure for CNI customers. Secondly, develop a battery optimization tool for a CNI customer based on the load profile, battery size, tariff, and on-site solar generation. Thirdly, assessment of the impact of tariffs on uptake of batteries. And finally, analyze battery behavior at the site level and its impact analysis. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have developed a battery optimization tool. Of course, we have some inputs that will provide some outputs. We can group our inputs into two categories, starting with solar PV and demand profiles. Of course, these are the data that we will be needing to optimize the batteries. The second thing is the battery specification and cost. That include battery capacity, power rating, of course, capex and optics. And finally, the tariff structures. In this case study, we'll have some results later on, but we have used the without and with battery trials that I will be explaining as we proceed. So in this tariff structure, we have few stops, for example, peak and off-peak, also solar times and rates, along with demand charge, capacity charge, and supply charge. As for the outputs, we are expecting to see some cost saving out of this optimization, along with the payback period in terms of return on investment. Next slide, please. Just quickly walk you through the overview of the optimizer that we have developed. Of course, we have got some solar PV and load data for a CNI customer. So we can have two scenarios. One is excess solar, another thing is unmet demand. That means that we have more solar or more demand than the demand and solar respectively. So if we have excess solar, then battery can be charged from the solar, known as solar charging, which is very known to us. But the battery is also constant by a few constants. For example, the capacity, the power rating, and SOC, which is the state of charge. Now, if we have more solar than the battery capacity, then it goes to the grid. But if we have more battery capacity, then it can also be charged from the grid. But this charging from the grid is also constant by the solar space, because we want to make sure that battery is mostly charged by the solar to use the local generation at the maximum level. As for the discharging, so the battery is going to discharge sequentially according to the demand charge, peak rate, and shoulder rate pairs. But if we have more demand, then the battery has the capacity, then it is it is made from the grid as per business as usual. Next slide, please. Let's talk about some results that we have. So we have analyzed a few tariffs, namely 4 of different DNSPs, Evo Energy, Essential Energy, South Australian Power Networks, and Osgrid. So we have considered 4 sites. Site 1 is a cold storage warehouse with 1.5 megawatt solar PV. Second one is a manufacturing, which has 3 megawatts solar PV. Third and fourth one have a little bit less solar PV. They are shopping center and supermarkets respectively. But when we analyze their profiles, we found like site 2 has the highest load demand, and site 1 has a little bit less, but still a good enough load demand. So we thought that they are going to make more impacts on the grid. So for this presentation, to make it a bit concise, we'll be showing site 1 and site 2 results. Next slide, please. Okay, let's discuss about the case studies that we have for the presentation today. So as we can see, we have 4 figures in this particular site. So we have 4 tariff structure. As I mentioned, just calling them again. So we have used Evo Energy, Essential Energy, SA Power Networks, and Osgrid tariff structure. So the cost savings, as we can see in the left side figure, actually is calculated from the standard tariff structure and the battery trial tariff structure. So this is the difference that is giving us the cost savings when we put those things as inputs in our optimization. Basically, we have used 2 metrics for this presentation. One is the cost savings that I discussed, and another thing is the payback period that will give us the idea that how first we can get a return on investment. and we have we are showing the results for site 1 and site 2. So for the first site, it was Evo Energy who is the most beneficial for it. But for the site 2 is the Essential Energy. The reason is that we have different load and solar profiles for different customers, and then this tariff structure have got different criteria. For example, in Evo Energy, we have the capacity cost, we have a demand cost, and this sort of stuff. For Essential Energy, we have the solar soak. Now, site 2, as it has got more low demand, so solar soak was good enough for the site 2 to have more cost savings. In terms of site 1, it was Evo Energy due to its capacity cost savings and demand cost saving, this sort of features. Now, if we want to increase the battery size, then we can see that the cost savings are increasing, which is great. But the problem here is that if we keep increasing, the payback period will be increased. The reason is that we have considerable battery cost, which is capex and opex at this moment. So that is making payback period a bit higher. Next slide, please. Case study 2. So this one I will walk you through. If we decrease the battery's capacity. Now, if we decrease the battery capacity, that means battery operation will be restricted. So that means we have less charging and discharging. This is impacting the of course, the operation of the CNI customer as they are the part of that optimization. So we can see that cost savings are decreased compared to the last slide. Now, if we increase the battery size bit more, then we can see that the cost savings are increasing compared to the first figure, but the payoff periods are increasing due to the capex and opex. Next slide, please. So in the third case study, it is increased battery capacity. This is the opposite of the last slide. So if we increase the battery capacity, that means the battery operation is getting increased. So we have more cost savings compared to the slide 22, which was the first case study. But like if we start increasing the battery size, then we can see that more cost savings are found, but payback periods are increasing as well. Next slide, please. So summary. Cost savings depends on various factors, including battery size, load and solar PV profiles, and the tariff structure. Payback period also depends on various factors, including battery size, battery cost, load and solar PV profiles, and tariff structure. Payback period in the trial tariffs are lower than that of standard ones. So we are thinking that trial tariffs are good for this CNI customer. So I just note here, we have taken all the data for the tariff structure from AR website, and those are applicable for 2022 and 2023 periods. The next slide, please. Now, see some results, like if we incorporate the optimization at the network level, like what is going to happen to the network. So for this one, we have some result, but we have used a representative network, which is there in the screen. So we are using the sites at the different location of this network to understand how the network voltages and line loading will be impacted. So next slide, please. In the case study 1, we have located site 1 and site 2 at the middle of the feeder. So we can see that we have the bus voltages and line loading here, and then the 4 tariff structures that we used are compared. The good thing is that we haven't found any difference between the voltage, any significant difference between voltages and line loading if we change the tariff structures, but there are some drops if we increase the load demand. For example, for site 2, we had higher load demand, so that is impacting network voltages and line loading. Next slide, please. So case study 2 is like we have considered that the CNI customers are located at the end of the feeder, and these figures are showing the range of the values that we have recorded from the network study. And then for the site 1, we have this time a bit larger voltage drop and line loading compared to the previous slide, because the CNI customer has got more load demand. So that is impacting the voltage and line loading. Now, if we consider site 2, which is there at the bottom, so we can see like more voltage drops and line loading. The reason is that site 2 has more load demand compared to site 1. Next slide. Okay. So the summary: voltage, magnitudes, and line loading do not vary significantly under the considered tariff structures and batteries. The battery can have more impact on voltage and line loading if the CNI customer is connected at the end of the feed. Both voltages and voltage magnitudes and line loading are within the limits in the studied cases. That means like we don't have any network issues for this case study. That we have found the beneficial of using battery at the CNI level. So I hand it over to Reza. Thank you.
Thanks, Imran. Now I'll take you through the recommendations. So we came up, based on the analysis we did in this project, we came up with 3 main recommendations. The first one is about the role of tariffs in the uptake of batteries. So in this project, we studied 4 tariff trials from Evo Energy, Essential Energy, SA Power Networks, and Ausgrid, and we compared those with the standard tariffs. And from our analysis, these tariff trials, they provide higher saving for CNI customers. Of course, as Imran showed in the results, the saving is a function of the load profile. Like some of the customers we studied, they had a flat load profile, like the warehouse, whereas some of them, they had a peaky load profile. So the saving will depend on their load profile, the size of their on-site generation, their solar generation, and also the tariff that they are on. But overall, as we expect, the tariff trial, they provide higher savings. And that also highlights the role of future tariffs and tariff reforms in a way that they are designed to incentivize uptake of these batteries. Like we've seen in some of the tariff trials, like having a gap between peak and off-peak periods, and also having a dedicated solar soak periods, like the one in the essential energy, could help with the savings for customers. The second recommendation is about battery price and value stacking and viability of this project. So for some of the cases we analyzed, the payback period was pretty long, and that's mainly due to the high battery price. So the short-term solution to like incentivize the uptake of batteries would be having grants and fundings to support installation of these batteries. But in the long term, we have been seeing decline in the battery prices that will hopefully continue in future, and that will make these projects viable. But also it's important to note that in this project, we have considered a simple value stacking, meaning we have considered mainly behind the meter services in terms of the demand charge reduction, in terms of solar soak, and these are not the only services that these batteries can provide. So batteries can provide a range of behind the meter services, market services, and also network services. And if we add those extra value streams, they could also help with value stacking and also help with justifying the viability of these battery projects. And the third one is, so from our analysis, we only considered a limited number of CNI customers with batteries on a representative network. And we didn't see a significant network issue in terms of voltage constraints and the thermal constraints. But in future, when we have more batteries in the grid, it's important to consider the network impacts and to make sure that we will have the network integrity. And one recommendation was similar to work package 2 is to explore use of dynamic operating envelopes for the operation of these batteries. And that takes us to the end of this webinar, and I think time for Q&A.
Heather, if you could just write your question in the Q&A for us. We'll get you to do that. Maybe while we're just waiting for that question to come through, Kedem, or Clare, I'd be really interested in given that the dynamics were there in how the researchers just laid that out. From a how you'll move forward with batteries and everything, and how you could more easily unlock some of those network benefits, how does that future look for you?
I'll talk. Keen to unlock network services value because it can improve, the economics of a battery. There are, extra expenses in enabling a battery to be able to provide network services to different DNSPs, and they all have different, operating envelopes in different parts of their network. So it's not a standardized product, I guess, that you can roll out across the whole of Australia. But yeah, it'd be great if, DNSPs got together and harmonise those kind of requirements for batteries providing services. A lot of them are, doing trials, which is great. So probably be, a few years off before seeing, a standard approach across, the networks in Australia.
And of the challenges that you face in terms of practical implementation, that fact that there isn't harmonisation amongst the DNSPs, and there's no motivation. It's not as though it's their fault. There's none. There's no motivation to harmonise from their perspective. How does that play out for you when advising customers?
It's quite simple. We just say it's a unilateral relationship, like a one-to-one with that site and the network, because network services are highly locational specific. What that feeder or that substation requires in terms of support. So there's no sort of market for network services in the way that FCAS or wholesale. So it is, that one-to-one kind of relationship at this stage. So, AGL has a lot of experience with demand response programs that support networks, transmission and DNSPs, with behavioural demand response, demand management, seeing our customers, VPP. So, we can help facilitate those relationships between the customer and what they might be able to offer with their assets and the DNSPs.
Thanks. Okay. Maybe if we go to Heather's question, I'll just check, Sanaz, we're okay to do it by voice?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yep, go ahead, Heather.
Thanks, James. Yeah, I've been focused on, in my battery analyses, on the spread of pricing you can get, and I've been pointing to some of those trial tariffs and going, look, they're not giving the network spread that you get behind the meter. So behind the meter, if I talk about AusNet territory, you got this spread between off-peak at 4 cents and peak at 22 cents. So suddenly you've got a 15-cent clear indicator between charging and discharging times. But a lot of the trial tariffs aren't producing that. And I guess the same for AGL, Clare. When we look at standardised tariffs, one of your big jobs is to make everything much more modest and not pass through, peaky prices from the market. So how, what did you guys find about, well, we need to at least get 40 cents from the difference between cheap charging and valuable discharging.
So Heather, can I just clarify, because I think that's, you're saying it's a question to Clare there, but you're talking about retail tariffs or network tariffs here?
Well, given that we're stacking both of them, so I wouldn't mind a reflection from the modelers about what sort of price differential we need, and a reflection from AGL about what price differential we could start to see in the way you bundle the wholesale and retail part of the whole thing.
I could start off just generally. There are different ways to arbitrage. So you can arbitrage on the network tariff, which might have peak and off-peak and shoulder elements, and the energy consumption part and the demand charge part. As you said, Heather, yeah, there's the retail tariff arbitrage if a site is on a time of use retail tariff. And there's also wholesale energy arbitrage if a site is exposed to the wholesale market, but that's not as common as just, you know, fixing the price for retail. So, you know, some of the challenges are, you know, sometimes those time periods for those different elements coincide or not. And with the wholesale energy, you know, if you're exposed to the wholesale market, then that site is taking on that risk that the retailer normally undertakes through, you know, providing a fixed retail tariff. In terms of the spread, it's, you know, it's hard to generalise because of all these different moving parts and elements in, you know, calculating and modelling a business case for a battery. And there's a huge interaction between what's the site doing behind the meter with solar generation, what's the load doing, what does the load profile look like, and the interaction with, you know, demand charges. So, you know, each customer site business case needs to be modelled separately because there are so many different components to it. So just saying it's just challenging to give a figure like 40 cents per kilowatt hour arbitrage.
I also wanted to reiterate what Clare said. Like, it's very hard to come up with a rule of thumb method here. It depends on the load profile and the on-site generation, and that's also what we found from the results. But also from our results, and which is in line with other findings from other reports, the demand charge is one of the important factors here, and it has different elements within the demand charge that also play a role in the savings for the customer.
Thanks.
There was another question in the chat I already answered, but that was about the grid emissions. So we didn't consider grid emissions in our calculations.
Clare and Kedem, would you be able to share thoughts on the outlook for batteries at that C&I level relative to other opportunities in the market, as in other battery opportunities in the market?
Yeah, thanks, James. Do you mean comparing different market segments, the residential versus grid versus C&I?
Not on an individual basis, but looking back more generically across the market.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. It's very much an emerging market, nascent. Residential batteries have been in households, you know, a lot earlier than installing for businesses, and that largely becomes down to the price of energy in a cents per kilowatt hour basis is less expensive for C&I customers compared to residential customers. Some promising outlooks are around lithium-ion prices coming down slowly, finally, which should then flow through to more economic battery pack prices in you know, the next year or two. Fingers crossed. I don't have a crystal ball, but that will then help you know, improve economics, as you know, the researchers showed in their presentation that the capex is, you know, obviously drives, you know, the business case, and that's the main lever to pull is reduced battery economic you know, prices. So that would increase the uptake, but we are seeing a lot of you know, government organisations and then some companies that are really interested in their green credentials to installing batteries, and some that want to innovate and appear to be ahead of the market. So it's more hospitals, universities, councils that are we're seeing a lot of battery trials, demonstrations going on. And I'd like to commend ARENA for investing a lot into batteries with the community batteries program, reflecting that battery prices are still quite high for that segment. So to subsidise those costs and improve the uptake and demonstrate those business models will move the market forward and the industry forward.
And thank you. And please, anyone, please still keep raising questions in that Q&A. We'll keep an eye on it. Given that complex, I'm going to ask two issues around complexity. One is, I'll ask the first one separately. At the outset, in dealing with the grid connection of a battery, there's quite a bit of to and fro between the customer and or retailer and the network in doing that. If that were to be made a lot more efficient, what sort of is that how would you characterize the impact on that overall capital cost of putting in a new battery for a large site?
Is that a question for me, James? Okay.
Look, I think it's probably an AGL because you're at that interface. Yes.
Yeah, so there's a large cost component in the whole of the battery costs that, the battery prices, like the actual cells, you can kind of work that out. But then there's a lot of costs around civils and cabling that can really blow out the CapEx costs that are very site specific. I don't have that much visibility around the connection process and the costs associated with that. We've got a team of engineers who manage that.
Sure.
Yeah.
It was just one of those things that we came through early on in this was around then the that time taken and everything in the to and fro, especially around the not being harmonised, and everything is a bespoke case that's there. The follow-up question that I'll ask then is around, so the researchers, identified the stacks. They showed that in different situations, it's a very different payback. What drives that payback is there. And Heather's question then came to effectively a rule of thumb type thing. And the thing is, it depends. Given that it depends, and it can change out in future, as in you don't know what the wholesale cost of electricity is going to be all the years forward, how much the FCAS is going to be dominant and everything. From a belief point of view, from customers are customers seeking batteries, and I'm talking C&I customers, to lower cost? Do they have a belief that it's going to lower cost? Or is it part of, are there other motives that are there? And how much do they have to be able to, how bankable are or do the returns need to be in order to convince them that it's going to be one of these buckets, but which bucket it might be changes from time to time?
Yeah, really great question. And because batteries can provide a lot of services, behind the meter, front of the meter, and that things can change, as you rightly pointed out. Your load might go up, or your feed-in tariff might change, or network charges. And network charges tend to be more stable and predictable, so that's a bit more bankable. Wholesale price is definitely, very volatile. So, AGL, as all retailers do, have a position on what that forward price might look like, and also, ASX has charts around forward curves. So it depends on the timescale to which AGL might provide that wholesale revenue, and what market it's in, and predictive factors around coal coming out, for example, that might impact forward prices as to what kind of predicted revenue might be earned by battery.
Well, probably it's a good follow-on to that then, but for Reza or any of the researchers to address. Reza, please direct this as you want. Was one that's in the Q&A.
Yeah,
which is
because
saying
this.
What's that?
No, because this partly answers the question asked the last question, the uncertainties. No, we didn't model those uncertainties in the wholesale price and also like changes in tariffs or weather. They are all impacting important factors, but we didn't have time to consider those.
And did you get into the other question that's there? Did you have any insight as to which of those value streams are more beneficial for DNSPs?
So here we didn't consider the network services. The value stacking we considered for the battery had 3 elements and all were behind the meter services. And out of those, the demand charge reduction, I think, was the most significant in the customer profiles we considered. Of course, again, it depends on the profile of the customer and the availability of solar, but demand charge reduction was probably the dominant factor in terms of the cost saving. Yeah,
okay. And it seems to keep reiterating the point that it's what batteries are not a problem to one not a solution to one problem. They're a tool that could be utilized in various different challenges that can then it depends on what the problem is and how well matched it is to that change. And I think an important thing that Clare was just bringing out then is, and that changes over time. And so how robust it is to actually addressing those changing needs. It's very hard we're all industry focused. We're all we find all of that fascinating. From a customer perspective, that's really tough because they're not as involved in there. And I think one of the challenges on all of us is how to bridge that gap that can be there. And some of that research could really work there. Lasantha, I wonder if you could share any reflections here because you've driven this project right from the start. So from a research perspective, in terms of where this could go next and what you'd like to see, what you think some of those opportunities are, could you share any thoughts on that?
Thanks, James. I think this project has opened up several opportunities for the CNI customers. So one thing could be how to use the machine learning techniques for the baseline calculation. So we have done an extensive study, the work package 1 headed by Professor Mahdi Jalali. He found out that if we apply not the complex neural networks type, simple interpretable techniques, we can improve the baseline calculations and thereby we can deliver the value to the CNN customers. And so that is one of the key things I think we still have the opportunity to explore, because we have used only 10 customer groups, I think 10 customers, and it can be grouped up to 5 types. So we can extend up to some other customer groups as well. So there is opportunity to further explore that with more weather parameters. So we can explore that territory, obviously. And the second thing is we have looked at how to remove these bottlenecks or the problems faced by the CNI customers to use their backup generators in the CNI demand response programs. So in that perspective, I think one opportunity exists. Even it could be equally applies to the batteries as well, because the same bottlenecks like the export limits can apply to the batteries. So if we can do further research on how we can further apply these dynamic export limits with the real-time smart meter data and further improve these things, I think that is another area that we can further explore and see how we can deliver the value for the CNI customers, because at the end of the day, all these facts will stack up and then deliver a big value for the CNI customers, because they should see the value to see, sign up for the program. So we have to do some more work in that phase.
Thanks. And Reza, any thoughts from you there as well?
Like one area we didn't have really time to explore was finding the optimal sizing for these CNI customers based on their load profile and based on the tariff they're on. Like we saw like there should be a sweet spot in terms of the cost saving. And we did a sensitivity analysis, what's the impact of the battery size and the capacity on the cost saving, but this can be extended and to find the optimal size for the customers.
And then maybe Kedem and Clare, in terms of the community batteries that are starting to come through and everything, what does that represent in terms of opportunity from a retailer, and how does it impact in with the other activities that you've got going on with behind the meter solutions?
Sure. So community batteries can be defined in different ways. So if you take the definition that it means connected to the low voltage distribution network, then I see it as playing a complementary role to behind the meter batteries at residential sites and CNI sites, and also grid scale batteries in supporting network constraints directly. Potentially providing local neighbourhoods, communities with solar share type arrangements, but they can be, in our experience, a bit difficult to implement from a retailer perspective with netting off billing and meter data and billing. Yeah, as I said, it's just part of that, part of the picture in the energy transition. If you call a community battery a battery that it's a community type site, like a swimming pool or a council building, then it provides indirect benefits through enabling that building to use more solar energy, and it can also be used to support the grid, so it has benefits to the network kind of that way, to enable more solar to be exported in that local network area, which then means that the poles and the DNSPs don't need to build as much infrastructure, which then lowers costs for everyone and benefits the community in that kind of indirect way.
Yeah, fantastic. It's going to be an element that we're going to see a lot more of on the landscape, so it's going to be interesting. Look, with that, thank you. You've been very generous with your time for all our panelists and insights there. I would just like to check, is there any closing comments anyone wanted to raise from the panelists?
It's an exciting time. Pleasure to work in this, area, and yeah, thanks to the researchers for their work.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Okay, well, thanks all for attending. I hope you got something out of this. We will be posting the webinar, a recording of the webinar, on our website. So please do go and revisit that if you want, or reach out to any of the parties directly or via C4Net at info@c4net.com.au. We'd be happy to push on any questions, comments, or further areas for you to continue your discussions. Okay. Thank you very much. Congratulations to the project team for the dedicated work over the last 2 years. I think it's been a really interesting project to be part of and have the interactions have worked between you. Okay, with that, we'll sign off. Thanks very much.